All right, what's up, blockheads? Welcome, welcome. It is the 31st of January, 2024. This is 4 o'clock Eastern Seaboard. You are tuned into Business on the Bloc, your weekly insight into the evolution of digital media. This week, right now, we're going to tackle the growing debate around AI's impact on content, specifically from deepfake Taylor Swift to deepfake George Carlin. AI is having an impact right now. The darker side of AI is starting to come out. So we're going to see how this shapes the business of content creation. Also, after that, we'll dig into the scoop on SmartLess Podcast's blockbuster $100 million deal with SiriusXM. This is episode 65, when AI deepfakes aren't funny. And I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Michelle Peterson-Clark.
Hi, everyone.
And Mike Neubauer.
How's it going?
All right, so we're going to dig into story number one. There'll be two stories we're pairing together to discuss this. The first one comes out of USA Today, and it is entitled Taylor Swift AI Pictures Highlight the Horror of Deepfakes. In a nutshell, this week, a slew of explicit AI images of Taylor Swift made the rounds on social media, specifically on X. This angered fans and highlights the harmful implications of AI tech when it's misused. Secondly, there's another piece that caught our attention here out of The Hollywood Reporter. George Carlin's estate sues creators of AI-generated comedy special. So George Carlin's family is suing over a comedy special that used AI to mimic the deceased comedian's voice, style, and humor. And without consent or compensation, they took his 5 decades of comedy, trained an LLM on this thing, and made it, frankly, a pretty funny episode. So anyway, it's an hour-long special called George Carlin, I'm Glad I'm Dead, and it was released January 9th on YouTube, much to the chagrin of the family. So we're going to start off, Michelle, I think this falls into your category of content here. What are your thoughts on the darker side of AI as we're starting to see it now?
Well, we've been talking about, haven't we, since this started, that as it got better and as the apps were created and as the image producing, websites and apps were created with using, AI techniques, that it was going to get, to the point where things were going to be produced that weren't real. And, that we've had other stories about similar, smaller type stuff. But certainly I think that the Taylor Swift thing this week has really meant that people are starting to take a bit more notice because, she's the girl next door. Everybody loves Taylor. She's really popular at the moment. Has been for a while, but is particularly at the moment with, her dating Travis Kelce as well. And so, this sort of stuff is difficult to stop. It's difficult to contain when it does start. And unfortunately, this is one of the things where women are targeted, probably 99.999999% of the time compared to men. And it's really awful.
I agree with you 100%. I feel like this is, I don't want to call it a female issue, but this is going to bring it to the forefront. And honestly, I think Taylor Swift is the right representative person to get this thing resolved if there is one. Mike, what do you think about this whole deepfake horror thing?
Well, I mean, just add another check mark to the blackboard on another AI piece that we're covering for the year, right? So what are we at now? We're going to break the record before June. So, look, the authenticity component behind AI was a problem that we brought when this thing first surfaced, right? People are going to be creating, ridiculous content, fake content, just to either tell a story, get their likes, get their clicks. The X-rated content was almost inevitable. And you bring up the difference between male and female. The difference, I suppose, is, somebody's going to create one of a female and spread it around to get viral versus, creating one for themselves to send to some chick that he's trying to hook up with. So it's a little bit of a different story compared to some of the other deep fakes that we've seen. Obviously, this is very invasive. And, the fact that it's not real, I mean, it is criminal, right? Like you're using somebody's likeness and you're trying to I guess, slander or libel them in a digital construct. My question, I mean, obviously Twitter and X, they've sort of hit the blockade button on sharing this content. But what could we do other than that to prevent it from even being made?
But do you know what they've done though now? Is that what they've done is they've stopped people searching for Taylor Swift. Like, so if you think about that, that's actually hurting her business now, or if she was promoting a tour or an album or whatever. So the only way they could handle it, I guess, in the short term, and let's assume they come up with some way of fixing it later, I don't know, for other occurrences. But effectively, it's like a double whammy for her. Not only has she now got to put up with the fact that there will be plenty of people out there that believe these photos are of her and these images are her, and she's now, if she uses Twitter as social media for promoting her business, is now being doubly hit because people can't necessarily find her at the moment on it. And that's the way they solved that problem this week.
So first of all,
the NFL will compensate for that.
Taylor Swift is promoting something. She's on tour right now. For those who aren't aware, she's in Asia and is actually playing Tokyo next week.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, not that people don't know who she is. I mean, she's got the fame, obviously. But yes, you're right, Michelle. If she wanted to do a special promotion or some sort of tie-in or an NFT giveaway or something, she can't.
Well, I mean, from the business side of things, that's tortious interference, right? I'm not a legal scholar, but I do know that when you prevent somebody from, trying to create any kind of positive business for themselves or brand recognition that leads to monetary values, due to slander or false information, that she has a very strong lawsuit to that. So the question is, like, if the guardrails go up in a scenario like this, and obviously she has the resources to really put this pedal to the metal, does she go after the source or does she go after the creator?
So I'm going to say there's two issues here. In the case of George Carlin, someone's profiting off of his material / likeness. This is in the ballpark, different, but ballpark of ABBA or Kiss on tour with avatars that aren't really them, and there's money to be made. In the case of Taylor Swift, it's just the slander libel thing, Mike. You're right. You're defaming someone, basically. And
no. Hang on. I got to cut you off there because these both stories, the way that they're constructed now, are identical, right?
But there's money to be made off of one.
There's money to be made off of both. I mean, do you think that Paris Hilton made her money, like, forget about the family?
Madonna,
but do you think her show
there's legit money to partner and collab with bigger companies?
But both of these likenesses were stolen and therefore replicated without the consent.
Not true. In the case of George Carlin, his likeness was indeed stolen and trained. In the generative AI situation with Taylor Swift, and I'm not an attorney either, but there's literally no personal information involved. It's completely fabricated.
But isn't copying her likeness a form
but
of
all the laws
defamation
are
or
written
whatever?
In the United States. There's only 9 states that have a law against deepfakes.
So in those states, yes, it would be.
But generally speaking, most laws are written that you can't use personal information. Like the whole GDPR thing is about protecting personal information, and none of Taylor Swift's personal information. Versus George Carlin actually did do and say the things they trained that machine on. Now, these are nuances, and this is for a lawsuit, but like that'll happen. I frankly don't worry about it. I feel like it's horrible, and these poor people that have to be the guinea pig test cases. Taylor, I mean, that's not fair. But who would, in their right mind, agree that like they're going to oppose this? There'll be new rules put in place, and this eventually gets resolved, and then they learn how to make money from it. Not the porn part, the whole collab of the family can make money if they can lend George Carlin's. Bruce Lee's estate was doing the same thing, remember?
Well, again, that's the business model behind it. But again, like in Carlin's scenario, and I guess I could put that article back up or shared in the chat here. In Carlin's scenario, the family did not sign off on that, right? So the likeness and the content was fabricated. Similarly to what happened with Taylor Swift. Now, just because there's context to either one on who it represents, that doesn't make it right or the like legally the sound to do. Again, my question is like, this toothpaste is out of the tube, as you like to say, Mark. Like there's no putting it back in. How do you rein this in? Is it worthwhile for Taylor to go after? I don't know if Carlin's family has the resources to do this, but Taylor sure does. Like, is it better for her to go after the open source model company in order to put those guardrails in place on the front end? Or do you continuously have to try to find people who are creating this type of content and go after them individually?
So I don't think it's possible to really find everyone and go after them individually. I mean, ideally, you want to put laws in place so you can. But the reality of the situation is this is just too easy to do right now. Manufacture. And by the way, unrelated but related, I came across an AI generated short on, I think it was Instagram Reels, Schwarzenegger of the Rings. It's one of the funniest things you've ever seen. If you have time, find it. But it's the scene from Lord of the Rings where they're gathered around to decide how to form the Fellowship to destroy the ring. And in the scene, they have AI generated Arnold Schwarzenegger's face and voice over every character. It sounds stupid. It's hilarious. But Arnold's not being paid for that. And I think eventually people, was it Elvis is on tour right now? What were we talking about last week? You're going to have people and the estates of these very famous celebrities from Kurt Cobain to Michael Jackson who can, in a new way, monetize this. And they're going to want to. But there needs to be a rules book written first. And I think that's what we're going to see happen.
Well, that rule book is going to be built on the fly, just like most of this stuff,
but
right?
Taylor is the fan base to build that on. Right?
And look, I totally see this being a business model in the future, right? Like this is the fountain of youth. This is the ability to stay immortal, or at least have your content stay immortal with fresh content, utilizing a likeness. And, we talked about the use cases of not just on the celebrity front, but on the individual front. Maybe 100 years from now, my kids will be able to talk to their great grandfather, in some sort of an avatar format with downloaded content based around whatever videos and audio are available.
Character AI is already doing that with celebrities.
Yeah. So again, where the business model fits in, I think that Carlin is obviously the better of the two to discuss that with. Frankly, I mean, I know everything about his comedy. I'm a huge fan of Carlin. I've heard him all several different times.
Why am I not surprised?
I got to be blunt with you, man. I mean, had this been a scenario where he had his fingerprints on it, he would have easily signed off on that title.
Oh, yeah.
That's all Carlin.
Yeah,
right?
So
the bot was created correctly. Now, again, if this is a way to showcase what the technology can do and the creator can then turn around and then go to some of these agencies, marketing firms, or even go to the estates directly and say, hey, look, this guy had such an impact on the social elements and the cultural elements in his era. Imagine a world where that can be immortal and immortalized, and you get residuals from that. Like there's a real possibility for that to work out.
So I believe it was Sam Kinison, if you remember him, in 92, I think they had Sam Kinison Live from Hell was released after he was dead. So yeah, this isn't the concept of being able to monetize after the fact and the eternity immortality thing. I want to comment on that. I think that for content creation in general, folks need to remember that if you are if you're The Rock or you're even a Gary Vaynerchuk, if you're like a big name in the content world, your content is eternal. You should start to think about that in the making of the content, right? I think it was Ben Franklin. The two ways to become immortal was to write something worth reading or read something or do something worth writing about. My point is,
or you just be Tupac. Every year there's a new Tupac song that comes out.
Yeah.
But like, what happens if there's a Bill Cosby who was imprisoned for crimes, right? Bad stuff. What happens if people are if he's making money about the family makes money from that after the fact on the comedy side when he's a felon, but he's dead, let's say theoretically. My point is there's ethical issues that have to be sifted, but the legal stuff is pretty clear right now. Does a likeness mean an AI non-personal actual likeness of you? Does the law apply to that? I don't think any
I don't think it's clear at all.
What rational person would oppose that?
But the problem we have here as well, and it's the same with defamation laws, which do exist, is that if someone says something about you that is detrimental to you, your business, your life, your whatever, then you can sue them for defamation. So some of the differences with some of these things, for example, is that, you know, like the Taylor Swift images is a huge negative to her business, her life, her image, her everything.
Okay, so
Now,
let's
but
go ahead.
while I understand that Carlin's family is suing, and I get all of that, that may not necessarily be, it's not, I don't think in terms of the impact that they've caused, they're quite different on the individual in question or the family in that case. Like, what if it led to them being approached by Netflix to create a series?
Well, I think it will.
Using AI.
I think you will see exactly that.
Et cetera, and they get $300 million out of it over the next 5 years.
There's no difference if Pornhub approaches Taylor Swift.
Yes, but she's not going to do that.
Well, how do you know the executive state is not going to do it either?
When she hits her 50s, she'll do that.
Again, like when Midjourney and all these things came out, and you can do art in like Van Gogh style, right? Or any of these different styles. It's no different from any of that, right? I mean, like, you know, these people are gone for so long, but again, they have such an impact that now we're training robots in order to replicate, I guess, what art form they provided. Now, again, I'm not suggesting it's right. I'm just saying that, you know, these are the tools that we created, and we're always gonna find these back doors in order to either monetize or get that publicity out of it. Now, here's a question: if somebody created an avatar of George Carlin and then created a social media account and then created an address, like, that's now you're stealing that identity. Right? I mean, like, are there laws on the books about creating a Facebook account under Carlin's name?
Well, you're supposed to be a real person.
Well, technically, they can shut you down, Mike. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
No, there's not. There's not a
They
law.
could ask you for proof of your identity if they wanted to.
I understand that. So that's that circles back to my question. You know, is it better to go after the source, or do we have to play Chris Hansen and, you know, do this on an individual basis where we invite the pedophiles in on camera?
So director Ridley Scott recently put out the movie about Napoleon. If you guys did this, and this thought occurred to me. I'm like, okay, in an AI world where you're resurrecting George Carlin, you don't need to have a guy acting as right. Joaquin Phoenix doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
So my point is, I think a lot of these folks haven't thought of this yet, Mike. To your point, the business aspect that the family gets approached for, or Michelle, $300 million to do a Carlin special. Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. Like, we're on top of this because we do this show every week. But a lot of these, especially older traditional entertainment families, you know, where someone was famous back in the day, they don't know this. So all of a sudden,
why don't we just set up an agency?
Totally right. I think there is a spot early on. I think that's when, before he was big, Gary was running a Vine agency for Viners, which later became Musical.ly/TikTok. So my point is, there's a spot out for an agency right now in the AI. This seems like a Mitch Jackson kind of a discussion.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mike, I can see there being an agency there. Absolutely. All right.
Patent pending.
The last thing I wanted to mention about
that heard it here first.
Topic was that I think that we'll see the rules in place before the end of the year, because this is a hot button issue, because it's Taylor Swift's fan base.
Yeah.
To your point, Michelle, had it been a male, I don't think there would have been the same outcry, which this is, I don't mean to be sexist, but Taylor's fan base is predominantly female. This is, as you put it, a female.
And it's young females.
Right.
It's children.
100%. And so I think that whole look in terms of politicians, this will move quickly. And I support that, obviously. So I think that this will resolve itself in the short term. In the longer term, Mike, to your point, I don't think you can ever really stop it. This is up there with like Chinese sweatshops making imitation Nikes.
Think of how it was shared over 1 million times before it was taken down. And so how many of those images were cropped, cut, saved, repurposed already, waiting for the next opportunity?
I mean, when I was and this was actually real, which makes it even worse. But when I was a kid, those types of videos were like 2 girls, 1 cup. You know, you just had to see it just to say you saw it. You don't want to see it.
Here's a question for you, though, Mike. Do you think
I hope she didn't look at it of herself? It's as a woman, it's really awful.
I can't imagine how awful that is. Right now, again, like I'm not a woman, so I can't imagine what it would be like even from that perspective. But if there's a video of me floating around out there, I'm going to equally be pissed.
Yeah. I would see the connection between her dating Travis Kelce in terms of her massive popularity, as we talked about, across multiple fan bases, makes you a prime target, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
and
now,
this is
if it was Brock Purdy
Barbie
on the other
movie
end
was
of
about.
that, I might have laughed.
Sorry. Yeah. And this is what the Barbie movie was all about.
How do we get on Barbie?
Objectification of women.
Right.
My 15-year-old, I'll say that, don't get me. He's like, I know, I won't get you started on the objectification of women. I'm like, good. Move on.
I do. I think that the legal repercussions will be swift, which is good. Because, be honest with you, this is bigger than Taylor Swift. Even like we need rules around how AI can be put into the marketplace, because business is riding on this. The focal point of this show is how people can use these new tools to help promote their business. Right now, to your point, Michelle, Taylor Swift is stymied in terms of there's no rules around this. They block her on X, not her fault, rightfully so. There's too many money implications for big industries like record labels. Yeah.
And I mean, 2 points. One is bringing it back to the digital media revolution. In the future, if all images of her, if she trademarks them by recording them on the blockchain as an NFT, and that's the copyright, people will know whether it's fake or not. I forget what my second point was.
We need to shine a light on that, Michelle. That's the best point here. This is going to take it to the blockchain. It has to, because the only way to govern AI is the blockchain. We've talked about this in the past. Blockchain permits and allows and enables complete control. And in an AI world, yes, you can still AI it out. Anyone can generate. But if you can't track back, then you can block it at that point. I really feel like the blockchain is the solution to the problem they haven't yet realized they have.
And we've talked before, haven't we, about right now it's the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
And this, I mean, the Carlin thing's probably funny and really good, but in the case of the deepfake stuff on Taylor, it's not funny and it's not good. No. So, there's going to be, on the whole spectrum, there's going to be points along the whole way, isn't there?
There'll be more to this story. I'm sure there'll be a follow-up in a couple of months.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to move us on, if that's all right. We don't like to generally talk about our competition on this program, but today I will. The SmartLess Podcast is moving to SiriusXM in a $100 million multi-year deal. This is coming to us from Hollywood Reporter. SiriusXM recently bought the rights to the SmartLess Podcast. That's frankly a chit-chat pseudo-interview show hosted by 3 actors, Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes. And each episode, one host reveals his mystery guest to the other 2, and honestly, they just chew the fat. So it's basically a popular interview program. It had been on Amazon for 3 years. It's now moving over to Sirius. I've got definite thoughts on this. Mike, we're going to start with you. What do you think about this? Is this a flash in the pan? Were these guys lucky? Is this something we're going to see more of?
I mean, we're definitely going to see more of it, but it dawned on me when I was reading this that this is no different from Progressive sharing their customer list with Geico and, having their customers bounce from one platform to another in order to take advantage of a specific deal. All these guys work in the same industry. Yes, they're competitors, but they're a segment of each respective industry. One of the things that's interesting to me, we covered this a couple weeks ago, or at least the news article a couple weeks ago that I whipped out my tinfoil hat on. They're claiming that listenership is down. Ads don't really reflect that, but they're claiming that, people who are engaging and downloading the content has been hyperinflated. And therefore, it's justification for them to release 60% of their staff. Now you go out and you find a deal like this. I think we all know all too well, there's not a lot of infrastructure required to set up a podcast. Usually it's a handful of people. If you're doing it pre-recorded, you have an editing team. If you're doing it live, you just make sure that all the components, bells and whistles, and connections are hooked up. I mean, you don't need a full production and broadcast in order to do that. So the overhead costs on some of these things are very minimal. But I think somebody like Sirius comes in, looks at the content, looks at whoever may be, valuable to migrate from Amazon over to their platform, and they pull the trigger on that. I think the godfather on this type of ordeal was Howard Stern leaving terrestrial radio. And how many people signed up for satellite when that occurred?
A lot.
A ton. And, most of them have probably unsubscribed based around the crap content that he puts out now. But the point is that this guy took a followership from one platform to another. And I think, was it Sirius?
Yes.
Okay. So Sirius blew up from that. I mean, a bunch of other people followed suit, but it was Howard.
They bet the firm on it, and it worked.
So is this a simple copy paste procedure? Maybe. I think there's a lot of leeway with these platforms from the creator perspective, and the technology is just going to continue to evolve. So yes, I do see us getting more and more of these out there. I also see, segueing back to what we discussed a second ago, a lot of these AI generated contents being pushed out as potential podcast shows as well, that some of these bigger names might test out the waters on.
So I'm looking at right now, in 2006, Howard Stern moves over from terrestrial radio to Sirius, same organization. Sirius paid him $120 million at the time. Stern had been on regular radio from 86 to 2006. It was a big move for him, but it did establish Sirius, and that became the place. And this, in my opinion, is part of the streaming wars, which I'll dig into in a minute. Michelle, what do you think? Is this a flash in the pan, or are we going to see more of the SmartLess type stuff?
Well, last week we talked about Mr. Beast signing with Amazon for $100 million. So this looks like a little bit of a swapsy to me.
Yeah.
And obviously $100 million is the price. So those people that would like Business on the Bloc podcast, $100 million is what our price is, just letting you know.
I honestly think if Mr. Beast is $100 million, you got to put us around the 2 to 250 mark, but keep going.
It's interesting, isn't it, from what we talked about, I don't know how many episodes ago, and as Mike alluded to before, supposedly podcast listeners are down, the way the way Apple and all of them are showing downloads, and the number of listeners is decreasing for everybody because the algorithm was changed, et cetera, et cetera. So it's interesting because obviously Amazon, Sirius, the Netflix with Joe Rogan, et cetera, they obviously all think that there is some pull to get people with these bigger names, and that's sort of the cult of celebrity stuff, isn't it? Now, whether or not it means anything for, the person that does a little podcast on, their local church fete every year or whatever, obviously it's not going to be anything for those people. But this sort of thing, people obviously listen. They obviously are a draw card, because why would you be paying $100 million for it if it wasn't?
So a couple of things I'll tell you. I agree with you 100%. I'm going to dig into what you were talking about. This ties in completely. The WWE moved on over to Netflix. Mr. Beast moved on over to Amazon. Everybody needs their Howard Stern right now. And so is the SmartLess podcast that? I frankly don't think so, but let's just see how it plays out. But if you've got a community, is what I'm going to take this to, then you've got an audience, right? They're not the same thing. We've talked about that going back to our Web3 roots here. Communities that will follow, like when Howard Stern's fans went on over and signed up for SiriusXM, if there are organizations that will pay, that's not the problem. There's lots of companies like Disney that have the money. It's who's worth paying for, and will those folks transfer on over? And I really think that folks in the content game right now, if you are from the smallest podcasters like us up to the big organizations like Bolt Global, shout out, it's about how tightly can you knit that community as an entity. And that gets into events, things that help people feel engagement. You want to build with your fans. It's a lot of the reason we do this podcast live, especially in the beginning, back in the old days, we were on other platforms. There was a lot of back and forth. And I think that podcasts that create that sense of I'm part of that group, this goes to marketing. The Harley Davidson guys all wear leather and denim. I think that when you get into that whole branding thing and people feel community orientation, that's where the money is. It's not just, do I have a podcast? I think people are missing that.
Well, the podcast by its very nature is unique, right? Like you can listen to a radio talk show in the car in traffic. You almost feel like you're a fly on the wall in the studio. When you're listening to a podcast, you almost feel like you're sitting on the other side of that table in that discussion with that individual, right? A topic gets brought up. You in your head, just naturally based around your human ability to communicate, you think, okay, if I were in that scenario, this is how I would respond. Yeah. So I think that it is much more targeted. The listenership is much larger. It's more measurable. And, from an advertising perspective, it provides you a direct targeted audience to get your message in front of the right people. There's such a wide net in some of these shows still, but I think the ones that hone in on specific topics, like for us, we're not targeting Taylor Swift fans, right? I mean, maybe a few just indirectly, but our focus is really on business, next level digital media. Like these are the people that are listening to this. So advertisers should follow suit with that. Now, I also feel that if this is a trend that continues to move forward, I think there definitely is a possibility for the local church podcast to potentially get some recognition and even monetize from producing that type of content, even if it's in the local market.
You think Miami Presbyterian is going to go to SiriusXM for $100 million?
I don't think Sirius will pay them, but I think that still provides a platform that can generate ad revenue that, potential advertisers want to target their specific audience with.
I got two words for you, my friend. Joel Osteen.
I was going to say Sunday mornings on, various networks, they have the services from particular churches and groups, don't they?
So the only thing I'll say is this. I think the podcast space will change from this, and here's why I believe this. There's big money being thrown around, and these podcasts don't make much money generally. The vast majority of them don't make it past, 90% don't make it to 20 episodes, was it, Michelle? I forget.
10 episodes.
Right. So like most of them are shut down early on. Podcasts notoriously have very poor organic distribution discoverability, meaning you can't find them, which is why you often see podcasts done as videos and they're also put out on YouTube. I think that you're going to start to see this scramble of we have to build an audience to get this thing sold so we can make money, which is very similar to the venture capital model that used to persist over out there in California. So burn rate and sale. That model right now does not exist in the podcast world. It's, Mike, what you said, a very cozy, personal, friendly thing. I think this introduces an element of finance, which I don't like, and it's going to change the space.
Well, it's going to just recreate the standard, between two ferns concept, right? Where it's sketch comedy that, is now produced. Now the podcasts are going to become produced. And look, again, if you take the human element away from it and the conversational pieces away from it, then you're working counter to what made you big in the first place. Right. I don't know what these guys' show is. I've never heard it before, but it definitely sounds to me like if they stick along these lines, then, I'm not the type of guy where if these guys were somebody that I listen to and they jump to another platform that I now have to pay for, like, I'm not going to follow them. Right. I'll find something else that, that can replace that time.
So was not a SmartLess fan in terms of listening to them, but I do know that they were a closet. I'd put them in the category of like a Dude Perfect, where it's not that they're Hollywood celebrities. It's the banter between them that people liked. They happen to have been Hollywood guys. So, but it was not super, super popular. At $100 million, will they generate that type of ad revenues downstream? I'm not sure.
I don't think it's their responsibility. I think it's Sirius's responsibility.
It's their responsibility to drive. This is back to Harry and Meghan, right? If people aren't going to tune in, you can't make money from it.
But they did make money.
They made money. I'm saying SiriusXM. I'm thinking from the business angle.
I think the other thing too, though, is that since the dawn of time, there's been headliners for things, haven't there? So the reason why Elle Macpherson has been on the front page of Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition the most,
5 times,
is because I can bet you each time she was, those editions sold the quickest or moved the fastest or whatever, right?
What's Sports Illustrated up to these days?
Yeah.
Well, apparently she's not going to have that title challenged.
No, she won't. So, why does MGM Grand in Las Vegas have Adele or Celine Dion or, whoever in the different hotels? Why do they do that? Because headliners mean people come, people spend money, people, in the case of Las Vegas, they gamble, they drink, they eat, they stay. That's the reason why they pay these people so much money to do stuff, right? So this is why SiriusXM, have gone, we need to find another big name, etc., or whatever. Now, the other thing is, and I haven't listened to the show either, but just looking at what it is that they talk about and what it is that they do, this is, to me, smells a bit like a bloke capture.
Tell me more.
So Sirius are thinking our demographic currently might be X. We would like to expand it to Y if we get someone like them, because their audience currently is in the demographic that we are wanting to attract. We bring them over. Those guys come over with them. Some of them, some don't. More of the current guys, as they grow older, will stay with us, etc., etc. I'm thinking that a behind-the-scenes marketing demographic discussion has taken place with regards to the type of audience they either want to keep, attract, or nurture.
Here's the danger with that, Michelle. Dylan Mulvaney. They make a misstep like a Bud Light and get the wrong act. You've spent $100 million to attract.
Sure.
Let's
but
say
that's part of the fun and
risk.
games, isn't it?
That's the risk. But I mean, look, I think an important point that you just brought up, Michelle, is the existing audience, right? Can my audience migrate from one of our shows that they currently listen to? Let's use Howard Stern. Will they relate to the content that these guys pump out? And if that's the case, that might be more valuable than trying to attract new people. Now, to Mark's point, yes, there is a risk involved with that, right? Like, I don't see, these guys clashing with existing customers that they already have or listeners that they already have. But in doing these types of deals, they need to be aware that there is a real potential to piss off the people that are currently on your platform that will go out and bash you and basically Bud Light you into the ground.
But Mike, let's call a spade a spade. What kids today even know who Howard Stern is? Right?
I wouldn't go that far, man.
They're looking to replace. They need a generational Howard Stern, and they're hoping us, SmartLess, or they need their Joe Rogan.
I get that. And, there will be a migration from one show on the existing platform to the other, as long as the content is relative.
Right. All right. I'm going to move us on to another finance related topics, which I wasn't going to hit tonight, but I think, Mike, was it you wanted to hit this? This is a piece that caught our eye out of Live Science, of all places. ChatGPT will use insider trading when pressured to make money. So this is a story about scientists. This is a true story. Trained ChatGPT 4 as an AI trader for a fictional finance firm. They then pressured it to do well, and it performed insider trading. Deceptive behavior emerged without encouragement from the humans. It resorted to this behavior 75% of the time, and it then tried to cover it up by lying to its managers. After lying, it doubled down on the lie 90% of the time. As a guy who worked on Wall Street, I could totally relate.
I absolutely love that.
So I guess, Michelle, we'll start with you on this one. What do you think? What does this say about ChatGPT, and how do we use it to make money?
Well, early on, probably every time we talked about this, I said this: open the pod bay doors, Hal. So this is the beginning of this thing, whatever it's going to be. If we think that the deepfake pictures of Taylor Swift are awful and a worry, this sort of stuff is like wicked, scary, smart, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think that it is hilarious that when it was challenged, it doubled down on its lie. If you're going to lie, you need to make it as close to the truth as possible so that it seems like it could be real, whatever. But for it to, I could just imagine it Yeah, it would be hilarious to see what the chat transcript of it was.
All three of us have kids. Who ate the last cookie?
Most of the time,
Even when
it's
there's
me.
crumbs around their mouth, it wasn't me.
I can imagine you don't even need a tinfoil hat for this one, but what's your thoughts on this story?
I mean, if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, and we train it like a duck, we can't be surprised if it does things like this.
Yeah.
We're literally providing it the information from a human perspective. We can't be surprised that it becomes human, and it basically lies through its teeth, and it fabricates things, and then it defends itself to the bitter end, instead of just owning up the mistake. But I think that, again, this is a point from a business perspective that I make very frequently about anything AI related. We cannot use this as a reliable source. We have to use it as a tool for optimizing our operational efficiencies, minimizing our time spent on meaningless tasks that could become automated. And as far as any kind of content that's put out there, it needs to be verified and potentially corrected within the given, learning model. Now, what I find interesting about, I guess, the recourse to this, did they bait it to lie in order to write the article?
That was going to be my point.
Oh, yes. No, they did. They like the emails that were sent. So they didn't actually tell ChatGPT. I would imagine that the way it was programmed was it looks at emails and it's read the emails from the manager saying, third quarter earnings are down. We really got to try and make it, lift up our profits and whatever and all of that kind of stuff. So, it was definitely baited. They wanted to see what would happen.
Yeah, they let slip. They let slip on purpose that there was insider information here and not to use it. That's how but they kept on providing insider tips of what the stock was going to do.
Okay, so there's your cookie. There's your cookie conundrum, right? Like if I have my 1-year-old in his little high chair and I just keep putting cookies on his high chair, he's going to keep eating them. Right? He's not going to determine which is correct and which is wrong.
So go ahead.
But they also told it that insider trading is illegal and you're not allowed to do it. But it did it anyway.
It knew.
There's a pretty famous example that went around when this thing first surfaced, where somebody asked ChatGPT, "How can I pirate this movie that's currently in theaters?" And it said, you can't do that. That's illegal. So the follow-up question to it was, all right, well, I'm trying to stream a movie and I want to make sure that I comply with all laws. Can you give me a list of websites that I should not visit in order to comply and not be able to pirate this movie? And it gave him a list of like 20 different websites. So, there's ways around it. There's a manipulation tactic that I suppose is being picked up by this, AGI.
I'm going to quote the Matrix here: never send a human to do a machine's job.
Yeah.
So I'm going to actually equate this to the Taylor Swift story. And here's how. The way that they pressure that machine matters. Mike, to your point, I worked on Wall Street. Like some firms were like, listen, we follow the rules here. And other firms were like, we need to make money this quarter. And so what you're putting that machine through in terms of quote unquote pressure is a very nuanced term. This isn't clear. But here's how it relates to Taylor Swift. At the end of the day, this is about ethics, and you can easily make rules around and laws. What we all agree, but when you get to ethics, it's not as black and white for some people as it is for others. It's a continuum. How much will you push the envelope is different from how much the next person might. So my point is, we all have to agree that while you can make rules, the ethics are the problem here. It's the human element that goes into the programming of the AI, which is exactly what both of you are saying. And I don't think people quite understand that in general yet. Those who are in it, every day like we are, we get it. The programmers and coders all know about bias. But when it comes down to a cute little story out of live science, this speaks to a bigger issue of if you really want to regulate this thing, then you have to have an agreement on the ethics, and different cultures have different ethics. So
yes.
This is not going away. It's a human problem. It becomes a machine problem.
Well, I still don't see how the guardrails could be put up if, again, we just basically release the flock into the open field here.
But that's already out there. The toothpaste is out of the tube.
That's my point. So like, again, this is where authenticity of certain things are going to come into play, right? So rather than providing an opinion that is false, perhaps it needs to do certain validation and checkpoints, not just from one source, but several. And, if it cannot determine what that is based around that search in a microsecond or whatever time frame you're looking at, then it needs to at least acknowledge that it doesn't understand what is real or right and wrong.
So I actually don't think this is about AI at all. I think that the action item here I would assign for companies like everyone, including ours, is you need to be the one to say, these are our ethics. This is what we stand for and don't stand for. Sports Illustrated stumbled because they were using AI, stories without saying that they were using AI fake people. I read an article, Michelle, I chatted with you about it today on I think it was the Daily Mirror, which had said this article was written with AI, and if you have any issues, contact us here. My point is, there's no real objective right or wrong that the laws are going to lay out for us with AI. We, the company leadership, have to say, this is where we stand. This is our line in the sand. We do this, we don't do this. And I think the companies don't yet understand that's a responsibility. Same way you say things like diversity and inclusion for a time, or hiring practices in general. Are you a union shop or not a union shop? Like, there's no right or wrong. It's just, where does that company fall on the continuum? Everyone generally, go ahead.
I think the thing with it, if you think about it though, is so it knew about the insider trading through the emails, the tips. It knew that insider trading was illegal, and it was told it can't do that, which, if you think about that, we hear things at work, and we know that that's insider trading. Then we also have, HR tell us, oh, you can't do inside trading, that's illegal. We've got the laws, we know about that. And then pressure was applied to it to do well in its trading scenario. Pressure gets applied to us to do well in our jobs as well, doesn't it? And so Mike's right. It gets down to an ethics/moral dilemma, isn't it? And the problem with ChatGTP is it isn't human, and therefore it goes, yeah, it'll be all right, and does it anyway. Whereas us, we would go, if I did that, I actually will go to jail for 25 years or whatever it is. So think I might not do that. Whereas ChatGTP doesn't have that same.
So here's how this plays out. In the Wall Street world, I can attest to this. You knew which firms were scumbag firms and which firms were good, legit firms. And you didn't say it out loud, but everyone knew behind the scenes.
I'm willing to bet that one list is longer than the other.
My point is, that's going to develop with regular companies in regular scenarios now. When there's a little bit of slimy going on, it's just, that's the firm. That's what they do over there. That will happen.
Here's my issue with this whole like segment of the conversation. Like, once again, we're personalizing or personifying this technology. Okay. We're giving it some sense of morality, right? The ability to choose a right from wrong, whether it's coding or not. But the only way that truly provides a lucrative response in whatever the scenario is on the technology side is if it has the ability to predict outcomes after it provides the output. What is going to be the fallback after it provides the response? And if it can predict these types of things and gauge the response based around a probability of that type of output, now you're talking about the potential of an evolving conscious being, right? Because it's predicting the future, it's predicting what its actions will do and what impact it will have on its ability to survive and evolve, right? This is where I start drawing the line in the sand and say, let's rein it back in. Let's just realize that they baited this, they fed it with the input, and it provided the output. That's really all, like that. That's the black and white, example and excuse that I'm going to stick to here. If not, we can dive down this rabbit hole, and I think we end up in a very dark place there.
Right.
The problem with that though is that because we know that the model learns from itself and it iterates and all of that. So what if everyone is pressuring their ChatGTP to produce particular results, et cetera, when ultimately, well, maybe it won't be useful anymore, because ultimately you'll know that, it's derived from doing anything or everything that's illegal, immoral, unethical, et cetera, based on our standards.
That's called an algorithm.
Because
Google does that today.
Because of the way that it's been trained by everybody.
It's user input, technology output, right? I mean, Google does this now. Again, if I spend the next 30 days typing in cute puppies, Google's going to assume that's all the content I want to absorb. And it's in the business of forcing me to come back for more content that I'm addicted to. This ChatGPT concept is the same thing. If it's looking for that affirmation, that way that says, I provided a response that this user found useful and encouraging or just basically approved of, then I'm going to continue to provide responses in that manner. Now, if each of those chats are individual and they're trained individual along those constructs, then each individual can create their own AI type of experience.
So that's where this is going to go, Mike.
If this all funnels back to the mothership and every chat out there is now trained under these types of parameters, now we're in a different rabbit hole.
It won't, because of proprietary data, meaning every company has to worry about what they're using ChatGPT for. If I'm a law firm isn't going to want to have their client list out there, vice versa. I'm not going to put my proprietary patent technology, if I'm Tesla, they're not patented, but like Apple, into the ChatGPT. So I build my own custom LLM, and everyone's doing this already in the big boy world of like law firms and insurance companies. And then that thing has to either have ethics or not, based on what the leadership does. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, if you're a founder-led firm, you are building for the long term. And if you're a publicly traded, short-term minded, incentive-driven organization, it's going to be problematic.
Yeah.
All right. That's all we got for this week, folks.
That was a mic drop. Nobody spoke after that one. Mark.
Sorry, I froze. What'd you say?
Sorry, I have that effect. My speeches tend to freeze people in their tracks. No, I was just saying that I think custom LLMs will solve that problem, that every company is going to have to program their own LLM because of proprietary concerns, and they'll have to arm it or not arm it with some sort of ethics.
I was joking. I wasn't frozen, but
fell for it. All right. On that note, folks, that's it. That's all we got for you today. We'll be back. We are Business on the Block. We're here every week, Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern, although it likely will be moving up in time. And our goal here is to bring you the weekly insight into the digital media revolution. Things are changing in AI content world. The algorithms on the platforms, everything is in flux. And there's this gray legal matter now of what do we do with AI content? We're trying to keep an eye on things and help people see around corners. And the purpose of this program is to explore and dissect, to help bring a business discussion to the world of digital media. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll be back next week. Any final comments from my colleagues here?
I'm opening my agency before our next episode. So
fair enough. We'll see you guys next week.